The story goes that when Alexander the Great was at the height of his power, he traveled to the Greek city of Sinope, which is nowadays in Turkey, to visit the great Cynic philosopher from there named Diogenes. It should be said that Alexander knew his philosophy. His tutor, when he was young, was one of the most famous of all philosophers, Aristotle. So Alexander knew a few things about philosophy, and he greatly admired the philosophy of Diogenes, a philosopher who never wrote a word. Diogenes lived on the street. Cynic is the Greek word for dog-like. Diogenes lived like one of the stray dogs, wandering naked, eating scraps of food wherever he could find them. He'd be a dumpster diver nowadays, and sleeping in empty wine vats. Traditionally, he is pictured with a lantern that he would walk around the streets with, saying he was looking for one honest man. When Alexander and his entourage found Diogenes meditating in one of his overturned wine vats, Alexander announced, "I am Alexander the Great, ruler of the world. I admire your philosophy. I have come to give you anything you desire. What do you most wish?" To which Diogenes replied, "I want you to move. You're blocking my rays, man." As they were walking away, one of his generals asked Alexander what he thought of that rude, naked, homeless philosopher. Alexander replied, "If I had not become ruler of the world, I would have become Diogenes." Cynic philosophy is fairly simple to summarize. The purpose of life, according to them, is to live virtuously and in accordance with nature. Virtue and living in accordance with nature requires simplicity. All of the social goals of the cultures, according to the Cynics, money, power, position, possessions, are less than worthless. Pursuit of them forces us to act viciously and against the laws of nature. Cynics traditionally had no possessions, no homes, and wandered begging and preaching. Does it sound like anybody you've heard of before? Well, listen to this. "And Jesus said unto him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head." Or consider the instructions that Jesus gives his disciples before sending them out on their first mission trip. "Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, not two tunics or sandals or staff, for laborers deserve their food." In other words, he was sending them out to beg and preach. Some scholars of religion think that early Christianity was a Palestinian Jewish version of the philosophy of cynicism, which goes a long way toward explaining why Jesus would say some things that at first appear kind of odd within Christian tradition, such as, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple." This theory also goes a long way toward explaining the extreme ascetic practices of early Christianity, which led to Christian monasticism and to Europe's mendicant monks, such as St. Francis of Assisi. The point of all that, the point of Cynic practice, is to live virtuously and in accordance with nature, or, as Christians would later phrase it, according to the will of God. All of the social goals of culture, money, power, position, possessions are less than worthless. Pursuit of them makes us unvirtuous. Someone once asked Diogenes of Sinope about his citizenship. Rather than answering the question in the usual Greek way by proudly announcing what city-state he was a citizen of, Diogenes is reported to have reported, "I am a citizen of the world." The world being the Greek word kosmopolitês, the cosmos. For the Greeks, the term cosmos meant several different things all at once. All of the people on the planet, all of the planet, and all of the universe. Now, so far as we know, Diogenes was the first person ever to have claimed such a title for himself. In the ancient world, family, clan, tribe, city, nation, all defined a person's social location. And here was this homeless guy saying he was a citizen of the world. Which reminds me of a sign I saw a homeless guy holding one time that said, "You think your house is expensive? My overpass cost $20 million. But when Diogenes said it, the universe was a little bit smaller and more bounded than we see nowadays. For example, actually, Alexander, he wasn't all that great. His empire did not encompass the planet. It was just a little piece of Eurasia. Now the world feels quite different to many people as the planet shrinks before media and air travel. Now we know about such things as relativity and the expanding universe. It's getting bigger. We have a human-made object, the Voyager 1, that's now 13 billion miles out there. That's a pretty wide circle. The question I want to consider today is about belonging. What does a cosmopolitan and naturalist view of the world call us to do? Where is it that we belong? These are questions that philosophers since Diogenes have considered. For example, Cynicism is one of the streams that later led into the Greek philosophy of Stoicism. The Stoics stress that each human being dwells in two communities, your local community and the larger community of human thought, the cosmopolitan mind. The Greek Stoic philosopher Heracles appears to have been the first person to have imagined human relationships as circles. He imagined the human place in the cosmos by drawing concentric circles outward. First, there's the self in the little circle, then the immediate family, then the extended family, then the immediate neighborhood, then citizenship in some kind of a nation state. Then, according to Heracles, the circle extends to all of humanity. Our work as ethical beings, according to Heracles, is to pull those outer circles into our inner circles of compassion. Our job is to widen always our circles of compassion. Embracing those expanding circles, Heracles claimed, leads to orchiosis, a good Greek word, orchiosis, which is the feeling of belonging. We ourselves need it, and we need to offer it to all other human beings. Notice that Heracles is insisting that each of us must first understand ourselves in a deep way. I talked about that 3 Sundays ago about belonging to the self. We must have a realistic understanding of what's going on in our own heads before we can connect those circles outward. We must be self-aware in the center of the circle, and then we can expand those circles. And expand, I would say, they must. My contention is that what we call humanism is not about human beings anymore. We now know that those circles and circles and circles that Heracles imagined need to be very broad and deep. Now take, for example, the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, in the lead up to and during the Second World War, it became abundantly clear that national borders were a way to trap, capture, and kill people. If you've ever watched the 1942 film Casablanca, the whole plot is about getting papers to get out, which wasn't easy. An American, Gary Davis, who during the Second World War was a B-17 bomber pilot, became obsessed by the dangers of borders that he saw during the war. His brother was killed in the war, and Davis himself could not escape his guilt for bombing runs over Brandenburg, Germany. Now, by the beginning of 1945, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, no longer existed in that area, so U.S. bombers had completely free movement. Now, to give you an idea of what he was doing and what happened, in that area, bomb squads today still disarm 500 tons of unexploded U.S. bombs every year. 500 tons of unexploded bombs. And the estimate is that at that rate, they'll be done with this job in something over 200 years from now. There's a lot of unexploded stuff out there. Gary Davis was horrified at what he participated in, and in 1948, he declared himself stateless. In 1948 was the year that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights appeared at the UN. Davis declared himself a citizen of the world at that point, and he created the World Citizen Passport. You can still order one today. It's going with an article in the Declaration, Article 13, that says, everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of any state, nation, and everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to that country. Complete freedom of human movement. The World Passport has never been recognized by most nations. The U.S. State Department calls it a fantasy document because, nations don't cotton to people moving around as stateless cosmopolitans. As Captain Gary Davis knew, an ethical citizen of the planet, a cosmopolitan, will draw a circle of compassion around all human beings, whatever nation anybody happens to be born in. And they will work toward the goal of enabling all human beings to be citizens of the world. Davis was embracing Heracles' circles of compassion and attempting to draw a new and much wider circle. And today, many people are working to do that and to enlarge those circles of compassion beyond humanity. As we heard last week from Mistress Ginger, the vegan diva, a lot of people are embracing veganism these days to draw the circle of compassion around non-human animals. And many are drawing the circle around our environment and the Earth's remaining resources. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, in some nations, rivers and forests and mountains now have human rights, individual rights, under the laws of those nations. A decolonized, cosmopolitan humanism calls us to widen those circles ever wider until we become citizens of the cosmopolis. It was the freethinker Tom Paine back in 1791 who said, "Independence is my happiness, and I view things as they are, without regard to place or person. My country is the world, and my religion is to do good." And that becomes quite a bit of the sort of anthem of freethinkers through the ages. My country is the world, and my religion is to do good. How do we today live an ethical life in expanding circles of compassion? That's the question that contemporary humanists must ask themselves as we work for real change in the world. That sounds like a fairly virtuous thing to be doing out there, doesn't it? I think that expanding the circles of compassion is the great humanist spiritual practice. Well, you know what? Walt Whitman leapt to mind when I was thinking about Cosmos, not only because he wrote a poem with that title, spelling it with a K, which is kind of cool. Walt Whitman is 200 years old this year. How about that? Now, Whitman considered his book-length life's work, The Leaves of Grass, as what he called a Bible of the new religion. And it was the handbook for becoming a citizen of the cosmos. Whitman styled himself as a poet, seer, and a prophet. People during his lifetime would claim to be of the tribe of Walt. After his death, some admirers even tried to form a Walt Whitman religion around his life and his writings. It was so popular, there was a schism between the British and the American followers of the Walt Whitman religion in the late 19th century. That was taking things a little bit too far, perhaps, but Whitman is one of the best poets I know of at catching that cosmopolitan, cosmic worldview. Who has not looked forth from the windows, the eyes for nothing, he says in that poem, Cosmos. Who contains believers and disbelievers, who holds duty his or her triune proportion of realism, spirituality, you would say nowadays. Spiritualism got a bad rap later after he was dead, and of the aesthetic or the intellectual. Who, having considered the body, finds all its organs and parts good. Who, out of the theory of the earth of his body, understands subtle analogies, all theories. The theory of a city, of a poem, and of the large politics of these states. Who believes not only in our globe with its sun and moon, but in other globes with their suns and moons. Who, constructing the house of himself or herself, not for a day, but for all time, sees races, eras, dates, generations, the past, the future, dwelling there like space, inseparable together. I mean, notice that his or her, I didn't add that. So far as I know, Whitman is the first person in the English language to write down his and her anytime he mentioned his. He was trying to expand those circles of compassion. For Whitman, compassion begins in the self, in the body, that inner circle, and not only in your mind, but the organs and the parts. And you find all your organs and your parts good. Then compassion spreads out to cities, nation, planet, but remembering all the time that this planet is only one of billions and billions of others. That's why we put the cosmic Hubble pictures up on the wall this morning. And Whitman spreads his circle of compassion out. Races, eras, dates, generations, the past, the future, dwelling there like space, inseparable together. It's all just one big cosmos, the past, the future, now, everything. One big, beautiful cosmos. Mindfully embracing the whole cosmos. Now, that is a pretty cool spiritual practice. Let's try that. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.